Day 39 of the war has been dominated by President Trump's threat to, in his words, take down Iran inside 4 hours overnight. He said he would do this by destroying all of the power stations and destroying all of the bridges in Iran. Now, that's a pretty big threat, so let's think about what it might involve. Power stations first. Iran is a very big country. It produces 94,000 megawatts of power every day. And to do that, it has more than 470 odd power stations. Most of them produce relatively small amounts of power. Some of the bigger ones produce 2,000 of that 94,000 megawatts. But even Bushehr, the only nuclear power station, produces less than 1,000. So there are many, many power stations. Nevertheless, if you think about the bigger power stations, undoubtedly, the United States could damage them. They probably couldn't destroy them so quickly, but they could create a major problem of power supplies to the cities of Iran, really with a series of attacks. Couldn't really take it out altogether, but they could do an awful lot of damage. And the issue is not the number of power stations they hit, but which cities are really affected. If those cities had serious power outages for long periods, then it would feel as if the whole of the power grid had been taken down, even though almost certainly that would not have been the case. We should also mention Kharg Island, because today the United States bombed a series of military installations on Kharg Island. They've done it once before, they did it again today. Maybe that's a prelude to either destroying the whole of Kharg Island, all of the transit facilities. 90% of all of Iran's oil comes out of Kharg Island, or maybe to occupy Kharg Island as a bargaining chip. We don't know. But clearly, that campaign is ramping up even before the big apocalyptic threats that President Trump has issued have got going. The other thing that's interesting is that President Trump has said he'll take down all of the bridges. He'll destroy all of the bridges. Well, there are a lot of bridges in Iran. If you look at a flat map, you might wonder where the bridges are. If you look at a topographical map, you can see there must be an awful lot of bridges in Iran. Because of the mountainous nature, particularly of southern Iran and western Iran, there will be many, many bridges. And Iran's own bridge maintenance survey listed 300,000 bridges, some small, some large. Clearly, the United States is not going to attack them all, but it might attack some. And it might attack some which are symbolically quite important. Like this bridge that was attacked last week now, the B1 bridge that was still under construction, which is part of the infrastructure of Tehran itself as the capital. Something interesting about this. Bridges can be attacked. They're not that easy to actually destroy completely. It takes an awful lot of attacking to actually get at the structure of the bridge itself. Generally speaking, you've got to get explosions right down on the ground going upwards rather than missiles coming downwards. So, of course, bridges can be severely damaged. They can be put out of action for a long time. But 330,000 bridges destroyed can't happen. Some bridges destroyed and put out of action, yes, of course. That can happen and probably will happen if this threat is carried out. And then the Israelis have added their sense to this possible strategic bombing campaign by threatening the railways of Iran. They've said today that Iranians should not travel by train for the next couple of days because the implication is they would attack the railway system. And that's the main arteries of the railway system. You'll notice the main arteries don't really go to the coast because this is so mountainous. Railways can be repaired pretty quickly. They can be disrupted. Very hard to actually destroy them. But what this all adds up to, on behalf of both Israel and particularly the United States, is a strategic bombing campaign. That's what they're doing, strategic bombing.
Should tolerate that they are holding the global economy at gunpoint. But today, Russia and China did tolerate it. They sided with a regime that seeks to intimidate the Gulf into submission, even as it brutalizes its own people during a national internet blackout for daring to imagine dignity or freedom. Now it seeks to punish the world as cynical leverage in its death to America approach to foreign policy. We have long known that these countries are capable of paralyzing the Council through obstruction and manufactured confusion. Today's veto marks a new low, and it shows just how frightening a safer, more secure, more united Middle East can be. We have put serious diplomatic proposals before Iran. The U.S. remains prepared for meaningful diplomacy, but diplomacy cannot succeed where defiance, delay, and escalation remain Tehran's only response.
To the United States President's explicit threat of massive war crimes and target and destroys Iran's critical civilian infrastructure, this threat constitutes a flagrant and egregious violation of the IHL and the most fundamental rules of governing armed conflict. The United States would bear full and undeniable responsibility for committing a manifest war crimes and a crime against humanity. Iran will not stand idle in the face of such egregious war crimes. It will exercise without hesitation its inherent right of self-defense and will take immediate and proportionate reciprocal measures.
We are tracking breaking news right now on the war in Iran and that looming deadline. This morning, President Trump is ramping up threats to launch a, quote, a massive attack if Tehran cannot forge a deal to open the Strait of Hormuz by 5 p.m. The president posting on social media minutes ago, quote, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will, end quote. Iran's leaders responded to Trump's other threats overnight, saying if more attacks are carried out, the U.S. will be blocked from getting oil and gas for years. Iran's president says more than 14 million Iranians have declared their readiness to give their lives to defend the country. An Iranian minister has called for young people to form human chains around the country's power plants ahead of the deadline. Experts warn what Trump is threatening could be considered a war crime.
Let's bring in our former Trump Deputy National Security Advisor, KT McFarland. Good morning to you, KT.
Good morning. What an extraordinary day. And we are in for a 12-hour period that's going to determine the future of the Middle East and probably the world.
What was your reaction to that Truth Social? The whole civilization will die. He doesn't want it to happen, but it probably will.
Yeah, I think that what President Trump said yesterday when he said we're negotiating with new people, and then in the Truth Social post, which you've just read, he said we're negotiating with a new regime, a changed regime. That means that there are pretty active negotiations going on. And then the attack this morning, or just a few minutes ago on Karg Island. Karg Island it does two things. It's in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz, and it has military facilities on the site, on the island, and it has where all the oil gets offloaded from Iran pipelines and then onto tankers. So what President Trump has just done is he's taken out the military capability, all the facilities, the naval facilities and others on Karg Island, and all he has to do is turn the guns just a few miles, and he could take out their entire oil export industry. And as you've just talked about, this is like 50% of their GNP. This is the IRGC's piggy bank. This is how they make the money. And so President Trump is saying to these new leaders that he's now negotiating with, see what I can do, and in 12 hours, if you don't agree to my demands, then we could blow up the whole thing. And that really will set Iran's economy back, its infrastructure back. It could be rebuilt, and it could be rebuilt with American help, but it will put Iran in just a devastating position. So this is going to be the most bare-knuckle 12 hours you have ever experienced.
And the escalation ladder that he has just put in that post is quite significant. What would you say to those that think maybe this is Trump bluffing?
You got to start paying attention. You know, I've been in the Situation Room with President Trump in the first term where he had to make really tough calls. And it was whether it was military calls or others. He made the tough calls. He understands the significance and the danger of it and the risk, but he's willing to take the tough call. Do not underestimate his ability. He is not bluffing.
A number of significant developments in the war with Iran, which is now stretching into its 6th week. Moments ago, President Trump once again reiterated his threat to devastate Iran if a deal is not reached before the deadline he set of 8 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. The President of the United States posting on social media, in part this: a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. Trump, however, is leaving the door open for a breakthrough, adding, maybe something revolutionary, wonderful can happen. Who knows? We will find out tonight. Trump has been threatening this level of devastation for weeks now, repeatedly delaying the attacks on critical infrastructure, like power plants and bridges, attacks that could amount to war crimes. But he suggested in that post, as well as yesterday to reporters, that this latest timeline, his latest deadline, is final.
This is a critical period. They have a period of, well, till tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I gave them an extension. They asked for an extension of 7 days, right? I said, Steve, give them 10 days. 10 days is up actually today, so I gave them 11, I guess, indirectly. I thought it was inappropriate the day after Easter. I want to be a nice person. They have till tomorrow. Now, we'll see what happens. I can tell you they're negotiating, we think, in good faith. We're going to find out. We're getting the help of some incredible countries that want this to be ended because it affects them also. A lot of people are affected by this. But we're giving them till tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern time. And after that, they're going to have no bridges. They're going to have no power plants. Stone Ages, yeah. Stone Ages.
For its part, Iran says it would, quote, deprive the U.S. and its allies of the region's oil and gas for years if President Trump carries out that threat. Meanwhile, Iran this morning is already reporting a series of attacks on key infrastructure, saying airstrikes took out a railway bridge, a train station, and a highway bridge in cities across the country. Neither the U.S. or Israel immediately claimed responsibility for the strikes, but the IDF did earlier warn Iranians not to use trains. This comes as the U.S. conducted strikes on military targets on Karg Island. A U.S. official with direct knowledge of these events tells MS Now. This was not an oil infrastructure strike, the official stressed, describing the attack as restrikes on what the U.S. had previously hit. The attack occurred in the early morning overnight hours, East Coast time Tuesday, and we're now 11 hours from this deadline. Let's just repeat for a moment the President of the United States and his post this morning. That is threatening a war crime, and we know he is, fond of over-the-top language. He is fond of, fire and fury threats and the like. But this, to me, is something entirely new. And even if it does prove to just be a bluff of some sort or a bargaining tactic, this is still a new place for a president of the United States. This is the rhetoric we associate with people like Vladimir Putin, with people like Kim Jong-un, with the monsters of history. And yet we have heard it now from the sitting president.
Yeah, absolutely right. He's using the language of war crimes in a way that no other American president, certainly in our lifetime, ever has. I mean, America traditionally has tried to occupy the high ground. When it comes to wars are fought only out of necessity, not out of spite or out of, emotion or out of bombacity. And presidents, when they talk about war, talk about achieving military objectives, talk about, targeting military targets, not wiping out a civilization. Wiping out a civilization is the language of war crimes. And this is going to be, as you rightly say, you never know with Trump, right? Obviously, this could be just him chest thumping. He likes to do that. He likes to shock. He likes to threaten. He likes to look tough. He's almost 80 years old. He wants to look like a tough guy. But, it's a real test, I think, for the U.S. military at this point, because the U.S. military is bound by law not to follow illegal orders. War crimes, if that's what he ends up ordering, would be illegal. So this is what exactly those 6 Democratic members of Congress foreshadowed when they released that video a few months back, when they said that members of the military should remember that they are obligated under law to not follow illegal orders.
Approaching President Trump's deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
Where the president has promised.
Language of war crimes. Good afternoon, y'all. Here we are, live. We've got the Trump deadline looming over Iran. If you're tuned in, you're watching the Gabriel Speaks podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on this crazy afternoon, evening, where we have been watching a conglomeration of this morning's news coverage from left to right to center to UK. And we've heard everything from him being pretty much referenced to as a strongman leader to a criminal and everything kind of in between. And this is why war sucks. It sucks top to bottom, bottom to top, all the way around. This is another Fox News outlet. And it was actually, I think this is one of the more neutral ones. Let's see what they say.
Massive strikes on infrastructure if Iranian officials do not comply. We're even hearing from the president here this morning. Janu Her is in the live center this morning monitoring all of this and joins us with the very latest from the president. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, guys. President Donald Trump set what he is calling his final deadline for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. That deadline is tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time, but overnight and even this morning, strikes in Iran continued. This morning, we're seeing the first reports of strikes on bridges in Iran. Iranian authorities saw airstrikes have taken out a railway bridge, a train station, and a highway bridge in the country. Now, neither the United States nor Israel have immediately claimed those attacks. President Trump is now lobbying new threats at Iran. In just the last hour, he said, in part, quote, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again.
Now that look, fuck, that's fucking crazy, y'all. I don't know. Am I overreacting? Because that seems, I don't know. A whole civilization will die tonight. I mean, if you've ever tuned into any of my podcasts before, you know that I have not a lot of respect for a lot of the institutions and the money that runs things. I feel like the average folks, like you and I, get screwed over a lot, obviously. And I feel like there's 90 plus million people in Iran, and I'm guessing that there's probably a few good ones. You know, there's probably a few good ones. So to say something like a whole civilization will die tonight, you're not negotiating a business deal. Though we are going to hear how this is affecting business in a very bad way soon. This is life and death stuff. This is like people live, people die. And if you've seen some of the video footage of some of the attacks, I mean, there's video out there. I'm not going to play more of it since the big news corporations, as you can see from the reruns of this morning, tend to do well enough replaying those bomb strikes over and over again. But there is a scene where we blow up a civilian bridge. I mean, there's like, it's like if it was in Kansas or something. There was even like bums living in tents near the bridges and shit. It was just like a regular bridge in the middle of a city, and we just blew it up right in the middle of the day. Some scary shit, y'all. And every time you do something like that, you have to take into account you're creating enemies. You know, so I'll just leave it at that. And we saw pretty much general failure of any kind of negotiation happen at the UN today. That's a whole nother story we'll get into, but I digress. Let's let this reporter continue here.
I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. However, now that we have complete and total regime change where different, smarter, and less radicalized minds prevail, maybe something revolutionarily wonderful can happen. Also, overnight, a series of airstrikes also hit Iran's capital, Tehran, including a strike on a possible weapons depot in the mountains. Iranian state media.
How can something revolutionary happen when they cut off the internet and then murder anyone that tries to demonstrate against the current regime? How do you win that fight? Guaranteed we have already gotten multiple citizens killed because our intelligence has probably been running around there trying to get some of these guys gassed up on regime change. And there's video of that out there too, of these folks in high numbers body bags are stacking up. I'll just put it that way. I'm not going to broadcast anything like that. But it's not pretty. So how can we expect these civilians to rise? That's like asking, could you imagine the UK takes out the White House and Trump, and then they say, citizens of America, we're with you. Rise against your government. Like, are you kidding me? Fuck that. But we want them to do it. To me, I laugh when these reporters talk about war crimes in speech. There's a difference between responsible speech and a fucking war crime. I don't agree with the speech, but I think it's a bit much to call the speech a fucking war crime. Now, in a few hours, do we see him go ahead and level a country full of 90 million people? Are we going to watch that tonight? Do Americans have their popcorns popping in their microwaves? And we're just going to watch our military obliterate 90 million citizens and not say anything about it? Is that where we're at, folks? Damn. Crazy.
The reports at least 18 people were killed and 24 more wounded in an Israeli airstrike targeting Iran's Al-Borz province northwest.
Yeah, and the Israelis, we know that they definitely look out for citizens. They don't want anybody innocent to die. I'm not going to bring up the picture of before and after Gaza again because it makes me want to fucking throw up.
Of the capital.
Helium prices have more than doubled since the beginning of this conflict in the Middle East. So I'd like to welcome in the president of Pulsar Helium, Cliff Kane. Cliff, thank you so much for giving us some of your time today. I know your company ships helium all over the world. What kind of impact are you experiencing?
Well, this is, black swan events are not fairy tales. This is something that we're worried that if it ever happened, it has happened, right? So 33%.
So everybody take a look. Helium isn't just to make your voice sound funny and to make your birthday balloons float. It is involved in all the shit we think is important. Chips, MRI scanners, obviously the chips go in the smartphones, servers, cars, airbags, and also birthday balloons. A major shortage. It's not just oil, although we've seen that shoot up over $110 right now, a barrel. It's a commodity we have plenty of. Speaks to the effect of that impact that little pass in the ocean has there in the Gulf. The reason Trump talks about, in my opinion, getting, wiping out a civilization or whatever is because somebody has explained to him in the military. Iran owns that. They live there. This is their land. So what you're talking about, like, they own that pass. We can send soldiers down there and we can send defense down there and we can do this and we can do that. But it's going to always be a problem and it's going to always cost billions and trillions of dollars because this is where they live. And unless we want to live there, that's their pass. They can always get somewhere where they can launch rockets at boats. And if they can't do that, they can get in a little boat and drop bombs. I mean, it's their home. So it's like strong arm negotiating with Iran doesn't work. I swear to God, you can go back to my first podcast as soon as I ever mentioned Iran. They are a completely different animal than Iraq was. When we killed the leader of Iran, immediately they sent missile strikes all throughout the Middle East to all of our allies and all of our bases in the region. Iraq was a different story. Saddam was running and hiding under tunnels. Their military was looking for anything white they could throw up. Now, after we invaded, it was a big problem. But dealing with the Iraqi forces was minimal. Iran is trying to get millions, 12 to 13 million civilians to stand around all of their power infrastructure tonight, daring President Trump to pull the trigger and kill millions of innocent people. This is not Iraq. This is a game that they have always played. Always, since there's been Persia. Persia in the West. Persia in the West. Think about it, y'all. And we are getting caught up in the same cycle as our ancestors. It's fucked up. Now, it's not that we can't live without these things you see on the screen. It's that what about all of the people that work in these industries? And that's how they feed their family. Oh, that's okay, because we can end up losing 30% of the world's food supply as well. 30% of the food supply for the entire world. There will be starving nations. Nations. Not communities. Nations.
Of the world supply is offline for at least the next 3 to 5 years. And I know I always get the helium balloon thing, but it touches everything in our everyday lives. You know, like you were just saying, chip making, semiconductors, healthcare, your breathing gases, your MRI scanners, your diving gases. Guys, folks that are out there diving, they understand about the heliox mixes. And the batteries in your phones, right? The batteries in drones with helium leak detection for those. This one we're definitely going to feel, and we're going to feel it for quite some time. The price is already doubling. That's just the beginning of it. We're not even 40 days into this thing. And I can tell you when we talk about that pricing, 38 cents per foot is kind of the normal globally, traded weight for helium. We're going to be seeing that $2.50 pricing and higher.
All right. So, Cliff, you went through some of the industries. We're talking about MRI scanners at hospitals, phones, cars, AI servers. What are you hearing from leaders at companies within these industries about this, doubling already in the price? What concerns are they sharing with you?
They're extremely concerned. The issue with helium is we don't have ramp up capacity anywhere globally, right? It's there's very few facilities that produce helium, especially to the what we call the 5/9 grade, which goes into most of these markets. And what do you do, right? They're definitely going to have to ramp down production. They're going to have to stop production. And the semiconductors, folks, are probably going to feel this last. But it will affect, everything from the chips that go into your F-35s to your Patriot missile systems, munitions production. Consumer electronics are definitely going to feel the pinch here. So I would say in the next 30 to 60 to 90 days, right, those new iPhone upgrades that you're wanting, will probably be delayed. I think there's a report about switch prices going up. I mean, this is just the nature of how impactful helium is to our everyday lives.
So I wanted to go back just a second there to take a look at that graph, because this is what he's explaining, is how important it is to have this ecosystem of helium, right? So from gas field to high tech, the journey of Qatari helium, and you can see stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, helium's dual pathways, where it fuels all of these different industries. It's vital to all of these different industries. And these are things that, like, war doesn't fix these things. You can't strongman your way negotiating this when a proud people are willing to die. Are you willing to die? Is it that important to you? I guess we're going to find out tonight, because the UN didn't do shit. We saw China kind of go back on us, work some backroom deal. We didn't. So that's it. It's not happening at the UN level. Trump isn't going to get what he wants out of Iran through the UN. And so he's going to try to get it his own way. Now this right here, this is the live skyline in the Middle East, undisclosed location, but this is how much we're anticipating something to happen. This is the AP, wonderful outlet. You can see we're just waiting. It's kind of sad. Now, I watched this whole episode. I'm going to plug it here. Diary of a CEO. Okay. And this is a clip from that show. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to that, talking about how important shipping out of this region is and all the things that it actually impacts.
So you've got 5 scenarios laid out on these cards in front of you here that you think could happen next. I'm going to ask you to explain to me what the 5 scenarios are, and then tell me which one you think is most likely to occur.
So scenario 1, which is the one that I think I think Israel wants this one. Iran is destroyed. Okay. If that happens, we're all gone, because to destroy Iran, you're going to have to use nuclear weapons. Okay. You can't destroy it without obliterating it, as nuclear weapons can do. And that's the scariest. I don't think it's going to happen. My main hope here is that Iran realizes that possibility, and they've got a way to neutralize not America's nuclear weapons, but Israel's.
You think it's a...
How fucked is that, y'all? Like, there was a time when nukes were last resort. You did not... It was the mutually assured destruction. It meant we all lose. Nobody wins. And it worked for a long time between us and the Soviet Union, as both sides stockpiled weapons and other countries started creating weapons. And for some reason, we decided in the early 2000s, late 90s, that we are the nuclear police. That we're going to make sure we're going to ramp down a little bit, even though we're going to upgrade the ability of them to strike. But we're going to ramp down the production a little bit. But all of a sudden, we're going to be the cops that tell all the other nations how many they can have, when they can have them, so on and so forth. I remember the campaign in the 90s telling us that if India or Pakistan had nukes, it was going to be the end of the fucking world. Both nations have nukes. Neither has used them. The only nation that's used them is us. And those weren't even 1/20th the strength that they are now. And now we're considering this? This was like a bad joke you would hear back in the day, right? You would hear the joke about turning it into glass or whatever. Or I think even John McCain went out at one moment and sang that song, Bomb, Bomb, Iran or whatever. I mean, it got pretty bad. And we've had the Iran-Contra thing. We had Iran do what they did. Well, some of their involvement and some of the things throughout the years helping Hamas. I don't blame Israel for feeling how they feel. I don't. Again, it's not our fight to fight. We've given them all the weaponry. We've given them all the training. All the advanced shit. And they have advanced shit they definitely haven't shared with us, y'all. So why are we the ones doing these strikes? Why do we have soldiers in the area? I don't get it.
Provide natural gas. And apparently it'll
all these things. So that's the disclaimer. I'd say that I don't think Israel would intentionally wipe out the rest of the world or cause a nuclear winter, because that would obviously impact them as well. But I am quite scared of precedence setting. And what I mean by that is if we establish it being okay to drop nuclear weapons on people you don't like, the sort of domino effect of that for people in Ukraine and other parts of the world where there's conflict might then lead to, mutually assured destruction.
Yeah, it's the last possibility you want to have happen. The fact that it's even possible to contemplate it is a terrifying prospect.
Let us hope.
Yeah, so scenario 2 is Iran destroys the Gulf power infrastructure. I think that's highly likely.
Iran destroys Gulf power infrastructure. What does that mean?
What it means is that Iran, all the Gulf states have got their own power systems, mainly based on burning oil for obvious reasons. If you take out their power structure systems, then those countries become uninhabitable.
Is that what's happening already? Because I know Iran have attacked a few sort of power facilities in the region.
There have been a couple. There was one attack on a Saudi Arabian power systems, and that took out 2 of the 14 units that are critical for creating liquefied natural gas. And apparently it'll take 5 years to rebuild them. And there are only 5 companies on the planet that can actually do that rebuilding. 1/4 of the world's liquefied natural gas comes through the Strait of Hormuz. 1/10 of that has been destroyed. It's like 2.5% of the world's energy supply is gone for the next 5 years until those are rebuilt. If Iran destroys the Gulf power infrastructure, then Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Dubai, they all become uninhabitable.
And we're seeing that happen in parts. I mean, it sounds like
And we signed up for this global economy thing, right? Like that was supposed to be, wave of the future. Countries working together, helping each other out. It seems like it's also handcuffed us when it comes to disputes and disagreements. It's not as simple as just wiping out, not that would be simple, but wiping out a civilization. It's like, okay, then what? Like, if you wiped out a civilization, the stock market's already crashing. I think this was the last screenshot I had of it today. So this is where we were at earlier today. Here, I'll just move myself from the situation here. But yeah, down quite a bit. Down quite a bit. That's not good. And it's just the beginning. Don't even look at your 401k if you have one. Don't do it. You're not going to be happy today. So this global economy, like it means everything is affected. It's not just like attack Iran and then they're going to like bow down or whatever. And then, yeah, everything's just going to go back to normal. No, it's like, what about everything you blew up? We're blowing up a bunch of shit over there. And a lot of that accounts for the global supply and a lot of different things. You saw helium. It wasn't just like a helium shortage. It was that helium is used in the production of hundreds of products, which is going to affect millions of people and their livelihood.
These attacks have slowed down a little bit, but it was interesting that Iran's strategy was to attack their neighboring sort of partners and specifically targeting a lot of their energy infrastructure.
Yeah.
Is that in part to apply pressure?
Yeah.
If I attack Dubai, the leaders of Dubai are going to call Trump and say, listen, cut this out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the pressure coming back from the Arabian states on America, I imagine, is quite immense right now, saying don't do it. It's quite possible Israel could do it. Like attack Iran, and then Iran does a retribution attack. Trump, if you would have seen his tweet this morning, I think he's put it off to April the 6th before he says he starts attacking power infrastructure. If he attacks power infrastructure in Iran, Iran has said we will attack power infrastructure in the Gulf states. So we've got till, 8 days. I think he's bluffing. I hope he's bluffing. But if he does do the attack, then Iran will respond by destroying either an equivalent component of the Gulf states or whole infrastructure.
I don't think people quite realize how costly it is for regions like Dubai when Iran attack them. I was looking at some of the data.
Yeah.
And according to current estimates and historical risk assessments by Dubai officials, they lose $1 million per minute, which is 60 million per hour, or 1.4 billion a day when there's an unplanned emergency shutdown just of their airport.
Their airports, let alone their power systems. Yeah.
As we probably saw on the news, Iran had flown, it seemed like a couple of drones into Dubai's airport, which meant that it had to shut down.
Yeah.
If they're losing $1 billion a day because that airport is closed, I think it's the biggest airport in the world. It is economic pressure for Dubai, which will then trickle down to Trump and sort of force his hand.
Yeah.
So they've got a clear incentive to cause chaos.
Yeah.
This is a thing. Like Iran has entrenched themselves, and they have strategized and game planned this out for a long time. Like Iran had, what's it called? When we killed their leader, they have like 30 some odd separate military units. So where if one of them gets knocked off, the other one continues the mission no matter what. And it's not just the fact that there's 31 different units, it's that the 31 different units all get their stuff, like the way they supply themselves, in different ways. So if you take out one thing, they're still going to have other options. If you take out one way of them getting what they need for their explosives or their missiles or whatever, they can lean on this other detachment that may have another way of getting the things that they need. So they've been planning this kind of attack for a very long time. That's why as soon as we killed their leader, they shot off those missiles at neighboring countries. They were 100% ready and knew exactly what to do. We blew up a bunch more of the island right outside of Iran this morning. Power plants, bridges, systems like train systems we've talked about. I don't know how you're going to take out 350,000 bridges in a night. I mean, that would be crazy. You're definitely talking about nuclear weaponry at that point. And then you're talking about a bunch of civilian deaths and then potentially war crimes. it's interesting though. Like, it's in the Geneva Convention that you're not supposed to just assassinate another country's leader. I don't remember specifically what it said about kidnapping, but I'm pretty sure I remember getting briefed on you're not supposed to kill another country's leader. So Iran up to this point has been refusing any kind of short-term ceasefire. They've been demanding that we don't bomb them anymore, and we've been bombing them since this started, weeks and weeks. They want compensation, and they also want full control of Hormuz. That's the Hormuz Pass. That's the thing that's been affecting. We may not be feeling it so much yet, but we're gonna feel it. Like it's gonna sting. What the actions they're taking right now are gonna sting tomorrow. Okay, so we are going to switch over to the skyline here in the Middle East. It's very interesting. We haven't seen anything pop off yet, but let's see if we can get this volume turned up. I'm gonna step away for just a moment as we watch this is the skyline in Iran live. I believe it's Iran. I mean, talk about boring, right? I guess we could try to find some tunes here. Let's see what we got that I won't get copywritten for. All right, folks. Well, this is extremely boring. So I have today's PBS NewsHour live we're going to switch over to that now. I'm still watching the kind of a skyline cam here to see if anything crazy happens, and we'll definitely switch to that if that's the case. But this is actually, we're just a few minutes behind the live broadcast over at PBS NewsHour.
A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will, calling tonight's deadline one of the most important moments in the long and complex history of the world.
Such threats constitute incitement to war crimes and potentially genocide.
But at the United Nations, Iran's ambassador, Amir Saeed Iravani, stood defiant and laid out Tehran's demands. No temporary ceasefire. The U.S. and Israel must pay reparations. And Iranian state media reported that Tehran is also demanding financial control of the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's oil and natural gas usually flows, and Iran has largely choked off. Despite that public rhetoric, tonight Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif wrote that diplomatic efforts are, quote, progressing steadily, strongly, and powerfully, asking President Trump to extend the deadline for 2 weeks. Pakistan, in all sincerity, requests the Iranian brothers to open the Strait of Hormuz for a corresponding period of 2 weeks as a goodwill gesture. White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt says, quote, the president has been made aware of the proposal and a response will come.
Every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night.
Yesterday, President Trump said if Iran didn't reopen the strait and make a deal, he would launch a 4-hour bombing mission beginning tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, dramatically expanding last week's strike on a bridge that a U.S. official says was a planned Iranian resupply route. Military officials told PBS NewsHour if the president ordered the new campaign, they would target bridges and power plants that have connections to the Iranian military.
There are still some things that we'd like to do, for example, on Iranian ability to manufacture weapons that we'd like to do a little bit more work on militarily. But fundamentally, the military objectives of the United States have been completed.
Today in Budapest, Vice President J.D. Vance, on a visit designed to politically support Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's re-election, said U.S. demands included Iran halting all support for regional proxies, including Hezbollah.
They've got to know we've got tools in our toolkit that we so far haven't decided to use. The President of the United States can decide to use them, and he will decide to use them if the Iranians don't change their course of conduct.
But today, Iran continued to strike the U.S.'s Arab Gulf allies, targeting a Saudi petrochemical complex. Israelis rushed to shelters as Iranian missiles targeted Tel Aviv and its suburbs. And today, Iran's president called for volunteers to protect the country's infrastructure. He said 14 million young Iranians answered the call to create human chains around bridges and even the country's nuclear facilities. But the U.S. and Israeli campaigns in Iran also continued today, including what a U.S. official identified as naval mine and missile storage and other military targets struck on Karg Island, through which Iran exports 90% of its oil. Israel also targeted some of Iran's railway network. And one strike even hit a Tehran synagogue and its irreplaceable handwritten copies of the Torah. The campaign would continue, said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
I tell you constantly that we are crushing the terrorist regime in Iran, but we are doing so with even greater vigor and with increasing force.
And so tonight in Tehran, residents are bracing for escalation, hoping to protect their property and preparing provisions, while outside, hospital staff feel powerless, literally.
We think that if we don't have electricity, of course, it will be very hard.
And that threat over Tehran, Jeff, is looming ahead of this deadline that, at least as of right now, still exists.
And you've been reporting this out all day. What are you hearing from officials in the region?
There's no certainty, Jeff, as to way this will go, frankly, according to the officials that we're talking to. One senior regional official tells me that they're just simply too worried that both Iran and the United States have gone too far, and that neither of them would agree to what Pakistan is proposing, which is really just a ceasefire for 2 weeks, which Iran has, at least in public, explicitly rejected. But an official from a country mediating tells me tonight that they're confident that there will be progress announced, and that confidence is also reflected in a senior official speaking to my colleague, Liz Landers, who does believe that there can be a pause announced tonight. And tonight, Iran's ambassador to Pakistan just wrote
in the last few minutes, there's been a step forward from the critical, sensitive stage. Certainly, the mediators in most Arab countries, Jeff, are supporting, are hoping for this ceasefire, are hoping for this pause, if only because Iran is vowing that if the U.S. follows through on its threats, it will follow through on threats to destroy civilian sites across the Arab Gulf, and that really threatens many of their economies. So a lot of countries hoping that there is this pause, there is this progress tonight.
Nick Schifrin, thanks to you as always.
Thank you.
Now to Tehran and special correspondent Reza Sayah, who's been following this precarious back and forth from the Iranian capital. Reza, thanks for being with us. So despite President Trump's warnings of escalation, Pakistan's prime minister, as you know, today said that active diplomatic efforts could potentially lead to what he called substantive results in the near future. Separately, you've got the White House saying tonight that President Trump is considering this proposal that would extend negotiations for 2 weeks. So what's the view on the ground in Iran of a potential peace?
Yeah, we can tell you that Tehran is in receipt of this proposal by Pakistan, but still no official word, no official response from the foreign ministry and Iran's leadership. It is very early in the morning on Wednesday. Mr. Trump's deadline is set to come at 3:30 a.m. local time Wednesday morning. So a lot of people eager to see how Iran responds to this proposal that seemingly calls for a 2-week ceasefire and end to the hostilities by Washington. And it also calls on Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. It'll be interesting to see when Iran responds, how they react to the notion of a ceasefire. They've been very sensitive about this term ceasefire. They've repeatedly rejected the notion of a ceasefire because they essentially see a ceasefire as a ploy by Washington and Israel to stop the war, go back home, review, revise, reload, and come back and attack again. They don't want that. So it'll be interesting to see the wording of this proposal if it is to go through. It'll also be interesting to see Israel's reaction. You'll notice that nowhere in these diplomatic efforts is Israel mentioned. Obviously, they have a huge role to play in this war. They've been bombing Iran every day. And from Tehran's view, it is Israel that dragged the United States into a war that the American people didn't want in an effort to establish regional hegemony here. In Tehran's view, Israel can play the role of spoiler. So it'll be interesting to see how Israel reacts to these developments.
And Reza, how are Iranian officials reacting to President Trump's threat to erase an entire civilization, as he said, in Iran?
I think, like Americans, much of the world, Iranians have been used to Mr. Trump making brash, undiplomatic statements. But I think to many here in Iran, he's outdone himself with his recent statements. To point to Iran, a civilization that's 3,000 years old, and tell them your civilization could die, it's a jarring statement. It's a frightening statement. It's an insulting statement to many Iranians. So many Iranians are stunned by his statements, and they're not quite sure what he has in mind. Is he talking about nukes? What does he exactly mean? As far as the leadership, the military leadership, they've been defiant. They've dismissed his threats. Their position is if Mr. Trump carries out with his threats, targets civilian facilities, will do the same. The military leadership said earlier today that they have a surprise in store for Mr. Trump if he carries out with his threats. And they've also listed the Aramco oil refinery in Saudi Arabia and a critical pipeline in the Emirates as part of their target list if these threats are carried out.
You've said that people there are stunned by his comments. How are they preparing to face the threat?
Well, there's a lot of anxiety. There's tension. I was out in a local supermarket today. You can tell people are worried. At the same time, I cannot overstate during these 7 weeks, during this war, how resilient the people of Iran have been. This is a population with humanity and dignity, even in the face of this war. So they're prepared for anything. They're peace-loving people. They hope that this war ends, but obviously they're concerned about what may come in the coming hours.
Reza Sayah in Tehran for us tonight. Reza, thank you. For perspective now, we turn to Alan Ayer. He served in the U.S. government for 4 decades and was part of the Obama administration's negotiating team for the Iran nuclear deal, which President Trump pulled out of back in 2018. He's now at the Middle East Institute. And Miad Maliki was born and raised in Iran. Until last year, he was Associate Director for Sanction Targeting with a focus on Iran in the U.S. Treasury Department. He's now a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. With a welcome to you both. Alan, I'll start with you. We see this potential opening here. Pakistan proposing this 2-week delay, this 2-week ceasefire, the White House weighing a response. How do you see this moment, especially following President Trump's threat this morning to wipe out the entirety of the Iranian civilization?
Well, I hope that both sides take it, but this is essentially the same deal that was on the table before that Iran rejected. So whereas I see the United States has a good reason to hope for a ceasefire, Iran loses the strategic initiative it has and the chokehold it has on the world economy by accepting a ceasefire. So I'm doubtful that they would take it, though I'm hopeful they do.
Doubtful they take it, hopeful they do. How do you see it, Miad?
You know, I think Iranian regime is they're paying the highest price for what they're doing in the Strait of Hormuz. Their economy is really fully dependent, entirely dependent on commerce through the Strait of Hormuz. I think they're desperate to get a ceasefire. As much as you don't hear that coming out of the regime in Iran, that's just the way they operate. So I think they're desperately need a ceasefire. Economically, you know, they have a bankrupt economy. You know, regardless if they get a ceasefire or don't get a ceasefire, they're coming out of this war in a losing side.
Well, who is actually driving the strategy, the decision-making in Iran? How is this happening?
You know, that's a really good question. I don't think it's clear who is actually engaged in these negotiations. If it's Iran's foreign ministry, they've never played a key role. They were never part of the real decision makers. They were really on the front doing some of the talks or negotiations with the West, but really the decision maker was either the Supreme Leader office directly, and I can see in the current situation, not knowing where the current Supreme Leader is, whether he's actually alive or not, it's really probably the Supreme Council, Supreme National Security Council in Iran. We've heard names of former RGC commanders who might be involved in some of these communications. But regardless, whoever the U.S. government is engaged with, it's very clear that they might not be able to coordinate properly and stay in a ceasefire. You know, at the beginning of the conflict, we heard that Iran's president and foreign minister, they both came out and said some of these RGC missiles or drones that are being fired against Gulf states are done, you know, per orders that they had received prior to war, because the communication just didn't exist at the time. And I think that's still the case, that it's unclear who's really on the driver's seat.
And Alan, at least publicly, Iran seems dug in. They seem defiant. They also seem willing to absorb significant military and economic pain. Why? What's the long game here?
Well, the long game is survival. For Iran, this is an existential battle. The elite, which are largely IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, realize that this is the hill they die on, literally and figuratively. There's no plan B for them. They need to stay in power, and they think the U.S. and Israel are trying to collapse the regime and make it a failed state. So that's what they need to do. For that regard, they can't act, they've lost all their strategic deterrence pretty much, except for control of the Strait of Hormuz. And that's why they're realizing that's both the key to their two goals for any post-war scenario, which is they need to ensure this never happens again, that 6 months or a year from now, Israel and the United States don't mow the lawn, and they need to find some source of income, either sanctions relief or tolling the Strait of Hormuz. So yeah, for them, this is life or death.
Yeah. Both of you have pointed to the use of the strait as central. How much leverage does that really give Iran?
You know, obviously, it's, you know, 20% of global energy, like oil, goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So they do have, you know, the leverage here. Not, you know, mostly the Gulf states are the ones that are being pressured here. Now, the Gulf states, they have strong economies. They can probably go on and take the economic pressure out of what Iran is doing. I would go back to my initial point. I think Iranian regime itself and Iran's economy is the main victim of what the Iranians doing in the Strait of Hormuz. Their foodstuff, their agricultural commodities are coming through the Strait of Hormuz. You know, 30–40% directly comes through Bandar Imam Khomeini and Bandar Bushehr. These are cut off right now. The entire oil export goes through the Strait of Hormuz, almost entire. So their own economy is the main victim of what they're doing, and that's why I think they're really desperate to get a ceasefire. And to your point, the Iranian government pre-1979 revolution, they could flee, they could get on, they had passports that they could travel on and get out of the country. The RGC, the current regime officials, they have passports that are worthless. The Islamic Republic passport you can't travel on. So they really fight or get killed, really, at this point for them.
And Alan, we've seen Iran put forward these maximalist demands. What are the real red lines beneath that for them?
Well, both sides have put forward maximalist demands. That's why it's so hard to get a negotiated solution. Much harder now than before the war started, because I think both positions have moved away from each other. But for Iran, I think the minimal demands they're looking to get out of this is some type of guarantee, not verbal, and it's hard to guarantee that they won't be attacked again 6 months or a year from now, and some source of revenue, because they're not going to go back to the day it was before the war, right? That is no longer satisfies, in part because the new leadership in Iran, who we put there by killing the old leadership, is more hardline and more militant. So their red lines have moved farther to sort of away from the United States than the regime that existed before the war started.
On that point, can the U.S. or can...
So just to let y'all know, we're still keeping an eye on things live here in Iran. This is again, the Iranian skyline. They won't specify the city, which makes sense, right? It's kind of crazy, but I would imagine one of the larger ones, maybe Tehran or something. And it's weird because you can hear a little bit of like some small arms fire here and there. But that may be just kind of normal, crazy Iranian shit. I don't know. I'll be honest, haven't spent any time in Iran, so though I respect, any culture that can live out there in the desert. Holy cow. But yeah, we're still watching, waiting to see if there's any developments. We're about 1 hour from the Trump deadline here, so we'll see how this thing goes. But for now, we'll switch back over to the PBS News coverage.
Can Israel, for that matter, put forward a commitment that Iran can trust?
That would be very, I can see from the U.S. government perspective, we have major achievements. Let's just, be sure that we understand that we Central Command, U.S. offensive capabilities have really deterred Iranian missiles, Navy, drone capabilities. We have major achievements in really deterring Iran's ability to pose threat to us. Listen, the Iran pre-war and pre-12-day war was a completely different Iranian offensive capabilities that we're facing right now. They were building drone facilities in our backyard in Venezuela. They were targeting water systems in the U.S. They targeted a water system in the state of Pennsylvania with their cyber capabilities. They've been deterred significantly. I think at this point, they understand they need a ceasefire. I think they do understand they can't go back to the economy that is much worse than when it was before the war. They're probably looking to getting some kind of a sanctions relief out of the ceasefire. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think U.S. government is going to look into winding down the strikes and then reverting back to some kind of a maximum economic pressure on the regime. Now, Israel is a different case. I mean, they might consider continuing those kind of strikes that they've been conducting in Iran.
Mihad Maliki, Alan Ayer, our thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
In the day's other headlines, Vice President J.D. Vance is in Hungary today, backing the Trump administration's support for...
Okay, well, this episode is about what's happening in Iran. So if you miss it, we're about an hour and a half in here. I'm going to go ahead and replay the kind of events of the day so far. So this is from early this morning until just a couple hours ago. And this is, I always try to get kind of both sides coverage on a crisis like this. So here's kind of a summary of the day so far.
destroying all of the power stations and destroying all of the bridges in Iran. Now, that's a pretty big threat. So let's think about what it might involve. Power stations first. Iran is a very big country. It produces 94,000 megawatts of power every day. And to do that, it has more than 470 odd power stations. Most of them produce relatively small amounts of power. Some of the bigger ones produce 2,000 of that 94,000 megawatts. But even Bushehr, the only nuclear power station, produces less than 1,000. So there are many, many power stations. Nevertheless, if you think about the bigger power stations, undoubtedly, the United States could damage them. They probably couldn't destroy them so quickly, but they could create a major problem of power supplies to the cities of Iran, really with a series of attacks. Couldn't really take it out altogether, but they could do an awful lot of damage. And the issue is not the number of power stations they hit, but which cities are really affected. If those cities had serious power outages for long periods, then it would feel as if the whole of the power grid had been taken down, even though almost certainly that would not have been the case. We should also mention Kharg Island, because today the United States bombed a series of military installations on Kharg Island. They've done it once before, they did it again today. Maybe that's a prelude to either destroying the whole of Kharg Island, all of the transit facilities. 90% of all of Iran's oil comes out of Kharg Island, or maybe to occupy Kharg Island as a bargaining chip. We don't know. But clearly, that campaign is ramping up even before the big apocalyptic threats that President Trump has issued have got going. The other thing that's interesting is that President Trump has said he'll take down all of the bridges. He'll destroy all of the bridges. Well, there are a lot of bridges in Iran. If you look at a flat map, you might wonder where the bridges are. If you look at a topographical map, you can see there must be an awful lot of bridges in Iran. Because of the mountainous nature, particularly of southern Iran and western Iran, there will be.
Okay, we have kind of an important breaking news update here. We're hearing President Donald Trump says he's pulling back on his threats to widen attacks on Iran. The president says that includes an array of bridges, power plants, and other civilian targets, subject to Iran being ready for a 2-week ceasefire and to reopen Strait of Hormuz. Trump's latest threat over the Iran war hit a new extreme earlier Tuesday, obviously, when he said a whole civilization will die tonight. So it appears at this point, he's pulling back on his threat. So that's good news. I'm going to see if I can find any kind of breaking coverage of him actually saying that. We'll continue to kind of watch the summary of today here.
Many, many bridges. And Iran's own bridge maintenance survey listed 300,000 bridges, some small, some large. Clearly, the United States is not going to attack them all, but it might attack some. And it might attack some which are symbolically quite important, like this bridge that was attacked last week now, the B1 bridge that was still under construction, which is part of the infrastructure of Tehran itself as the capital. Something interesting about this. Bridges can be attacked. They're not that easy to actually destroy completely. It takes an awful lot of attacking to actually get at the structure of the bridge itself. Generally speaking, you've got to get explosions right down on the ground going upwards rather than missiles coming downwards. So, of course, bridges can be severely damaged. They can be put out of action for a long time. But 330,000 bridges destroyed can't happen. Some bridges destroyed and put out of action, yes, of course. That can happen and probably will happen if this threat is carried out. And then the Israelis have added their sense to this possible strategic bombing campaign by threatening the railways of Iran. They've said today that Iranians should not travel by train for the next couple of days because the implication is they would attack the railway system. And that's the main arteries of the railway system. You'll notice the main arteries don't really go to the coast because this is so mountainous. Railways can be repaired pretty quickly. They can be disrupted. Very hard to actually destroy them. But what this all adds up to, on behalf of both Israel and particularly the United States, is a strategic bombing campaign. That's what they're doing, strategic bombing.
Should tolerate.
Okay, so again, we've got now a Trump social post. And Trump has said Iran could agree to the complete immediate and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and that he'd suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. So it sounds like the 2-week ceasefire that the Prime Minister of Turkey was really trying to iron out between the United States and Iran has actually worked, which is a good thing. And hopefully we can figure this just crazy situation out without anybody else losing their lives, for God's sakes. Now, look, I'm not saying, Iran's just this great, wonderful country. They clearly support Hamas and what Hamas has been doing to Israel, and then in turn what Israel did to Gaza. I mean, it's all just this terrible, terrible thing. But make no mistake, like, these people that are in charge now are ready to die on that hill. The hill that they have right now. They will risk everybody. If you look at like Al Jazeera coverage of this right now, there's literally like Iranian civilians locked up around infrastructure, around energy infrastructure, because they were asked to for their country. Like, they are ready to die for an American missile. And this is just the civilians. It's like kids. It's not good, man. We just need to stay out of the Middle East, period. And let Israel handle their own problems. Just my opinion. I don't think I'm alone on that. So I think we can go ahead and close this one out on somewhat of good news. Again, Trump saying that he'd suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks, while this hopefully works itself out. Whew, man, talk about cutting it close, y'all. We're like literally 50 minutes, 5-0, away from the deadline that he set. Kind of makes you wonder. All right. Well, hopefully I'll see you next time on the Gabriel Speaks podcast. Hopefully we'll all be here, right? Stay safe, stay blessed, and I'll see y'all next time. Thanks for watching.